Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you all here this afternoon as we say goodbye to our friend and brother, Michael Modes. My name is Rabbi Gary Berenson, and I am the funeral director here at the Jewish Funeral Home. The service would be conducted by my friend, Rabbi Moshe Wolansky. I will take part in a couple of times, but I'd ask Rabbi Wolansky to come forward.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Rabbi Gary Berenson. Let's start off. I'll start off with the English of Psalm 23. Rabbi Gary will say it in Hebrew. A song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. God makes me lie down in still pastures. God leads me beside still waters. God restores my soul and guides me in the righteous path for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod, your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me in all the days of my life, and I should dwell in the house of the Lord for length of days.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo hechzor, Finos teshen yar bitzeni, al mei menuchot yenach aleini, nafshi yeshovei, nafshi yeshovei, Yacheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech begei tzalmoes lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha ומשענתך שיתך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורוי תשענתי בשמן ראשי כוסי רוויה אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
We're gathered here today, not only in this physical building, but all around the country, where our Zoom, our YouTube will take us. It's to pay a last respect and give honor to a dear brother, to a dear friend, Michael Modes. In Hebrew, his name is Moshe ben Tzvi Hirsch. Of course, I like to console his two brothers, Avram, Avi, Alan, and Daniel, who's right in our crowd, Daniel. As we know, Michael was born in Portland. He was born to beautiful parents. His father was an attorney. His name was Harold, and the mother was Lynn. But at a young age, these both beautiful parents were taken away from my dear Michael. He was just a teenager. Michael had to grow up his whole life without parents. Michael himself had to fend for himself. I'm sure it wasn't easy for him. I just can't imagine it. Anybody to grow up as a teenager without direction, without parents. But it didn't faze Michael. He went and traveling after he got his degrees, different parts of the country. He must have been a very talented young man. After graduating the local public schools here in Portland, he went on to Deering High School, as well as the Portland Hebrew School. And as a member, his parents were members, himself a Shari Tefillah, where they had the great opportunity to meet a great man, Rabbi Chaim Yaffe, who's still connected with the family even 50, 60 years later. It shows the greatness in Rabbi Yaffe and also the greatness of the Motz family to remember such a great man. Michael was a very unique person, a very interesting person, a very talented person. He had many different careers, different jobs. Most people get a job. If they're a doctor, attorney, they stay with that job the rest of their life. Michael was able to learn something new. A matter of fact, on his own, I think he's the only person that made an encyclopedia of movies. That means he had to watch a lot of movies and to make an encyclopedia. But he's a brilliant guy, and he did it. It's a very unique thing. He loved the Brooklyn Dodgers. I'm sorry, Los Angeles Dodgers. I grew up in Brooklyn. I have to say the Brooklyn Dodgers. From there, he worked for them. From there, he loved radio. He was many different stations. He broadcasted, or he was the host in different radio stations. From there, he went into advertising for the stations. He was a copywriter. But what he loved most was a journalist. He wrote and worked out for many years as a journalist. It says for some reason a suffix. Suffix means in doubt. Doubt is not a good thing. Michael loved decisions, yes or no. And his decisions were looked at, and people liked them. He was on Facebook, where hundreds of thousands of people liked what he had to say. But always was a good decision was very important to him. A matter of fact, Michael had a very special name. In Hebrew, his name was Moshe, Moses. I just like to speak about such a beautiful name that he had. It's by divine that parents give him such a name. We're reading the Torah the last few weeks about Moses. The Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt for over 200 years. They had back-breaking work to do. King Pharaoh had advisors, and he had stargazers. They looked into the future, and they told King Pharaoh that one day a little Jewish boy will be born, and he'll take the people out of Egypt. Egypt then was an iron curtain. Nobody left Egypt, at least alive, not even dead. So what did Pharaoh and his advisors come with? Any Jewish boy that will be born from now on, they'll be cast in the Nile, and they'll be killed. Moses' mother was pregnant, and God made a miracle that she had him in the 6th month. His parents, Yocheved, was able to hide him for 3 months. But after 3 months, she couldn't hide him anymore. Babies grow up. So what did she do? The Bible says, the Torah says, she built a basket and she lined it with tar to waterproof it and put Moses in the basket and put him in the Nile, hoping that after this baby's in the Nile, The stargazer will see, like the baby is drowned already in the Nile, and they'll leave and they wouldn't look for her and they wouldn't bother. But she kept her daughter to give a watch out at the Nile behind some trees. And Moses was put in the basket in the Nile as he was floating away. Wicked King Pharaoh had a daughter, very good girl. They say she had leprosy. She used to go every day to bathe herself in the Nile. As she bathed herself, she heard cries of a baby. And she looked, she was from a basket. It says she stretched out her hand, and her hand came longer and longer until she took this baby out of the water. And she named him Moshe. In Hebrew means she took him out. And she brought him to the palace, right? She found the baby in the water. What do you do with your king's daughter? You bring this baby to the palace. And these were the days before isomil, before formula. How were they going to feed this baby? The baby was screaming. And they had to find, those days they called in Hebrew, a Jewish mother. And Moses' mother was hired to nurse their own son in the palace for the first 2 years of his life. After growing up in the palace, Moses did, according to Pharaoh, something wrong, and Moses had to run away. And Moses had to run to the city of Midian until one day, we know the story from the Bible of the burning bush. Moses sees the burning bush, and he comes to the burning bush, and God says, Moses, take off your shoes. I want to send you to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. It was Moses. Moses said, I can't do it. I can't even speak. I don't speak good. I stutter. It's not me. So God said, no excuses. You can take your brother Aaron with you and go to King Pharaoh, and I'll give you a few miracles to do on the way. And that is exactly what happened. I'm not going to go into the whole story. I might be here a couple of weeks. Let's get to the punchline. After a year after the 10 plagues, Moses takes the Jewish people out of Egypt. And as he takes them out of Egypt, and a little while later, Moses goes up to the mountain and he gives the Torah, or Bible, to the whole Jewish nation as well. When the Jewish people left Egypt, Michael comes in the picture again. We all know he was an animal lover. He was a dog lover. It says, it's in the verse from the Torah, when the Jewish people left Egypt, the dogs did not bark. As I said before, I grew up in Brooklyn many years ago when there were stray dogs walking around the street. And me, from the city, we were scared of dogs. I didn't grow up in Maine. And sometimes dogs walk in packs, 3, 5 dogs in a row. But as a kid, I learned this verse by heart in Hebrew. The dogs do not bark. And every time a dog will come close to me, the dog will just turn to the other side and walk away. And every child in Brooklyn, maybe around the world, knows this verse by heart. The dogs didn't bark, and the dogs get tamed, and they just leave you alone. That's a native mitzvah that we see that Michael did, how much he loved his animals and how much he loved his dogs. When we speak about animals, I like to tell a story from the Talmud. The Talmud brings down a story that there was a great Rabbi Meir, a great sage from the Talmud. In those days, there were goats that would roam the streets, and especially near the slaughterhouse. And there was this goat that got away from his master and went behind Rabbi Meir and like, please save my life. And Meir turns to the goat, you were created to be slaughtered and give people food. As Rabbi Meir said that, he was struck with pain, and he had this pain for many years. Until one day, he was in his house, and his cleaning person was cleaning out the house. And those days, people had little mice and cats roaming around their house. It was before the days of exterminators. And Meir told the help in his house, please, these cats and mice are God's creation. Be nice to them. As soon as he said that, his pain went away of many years. Again, we see the importance of taking care of animals. Another thing it speaks about in our tradition, that a person that owns an animal, who should eat first dinner? The animal or the person? The answer is the animal. So the Torah, our Bible, our tradition teaches us that we have to have respect for animals. That's one of the things that we could learn out from Michael. From Moshe. Moshe means the light. When he was born, I'm sure his parents were so happy. He brought this light into the world. You have to respect animals. And that's one of the great mitzvahs, good deeds that we could learn out from our dear Michael. So lesson we can learn out. And one of the things that Michael did lately was he used to give his ideas on Facebook from the thousands of followers that followed him on Facebook. In Hebrew is the word Facebook also. And our media, our social media today, let's hope that you should learn lessons from Michael. Let's hope we're doing good deeds. Acts of goodness and kindness will merit the coming of Messiah, united with our Michael again, and again with his dear parents, speeding in our days. And let's all say Amen, and will be the real true peace all over the world.
Thank you, Rabbi Walensky. I'd like to invite family friend and dear friend of Michael, Steve Schwartz, with a few remarks.
We're also cousins. We couldn't figure out if we were second or third cousins or fourth cousins, but my mother's maiden name was Maud, so we were related. I've known Michael since we were young boys, being driven to the Jewish Community Center, alternately by our fathers. Michael's father, Harry, picking us up in his Lincoln Continental with the doors that opened from the rear with handles next to each other. We'd sometimes play at his house on Saunders Street afterwards. His mother, Lillian, at the table reading, always reading. We'd go to the basement to play pool on a table that his father, an attorney, was holding for a bankruptcy estate. He had a lot of fun property down there. There's no other way to put it. The family was brilliant. Alan, the oldest brother, doing math equations for fun, becoming ultra-Orthodox and moving to Brooklyn. Dan going to law school and becoming a permanent law clerk at an Illinois appellate court. And Michael, ever clever and witty, with a great and even mischievous sense of humor. One story from when we were kids that Dan relates to is that when the three brothers had trouble getting along, as three brothers will, their mom suggested, why don't each of you pretend that you're best friends? And then they pointed out to their mother that Michael's best friend was Michael Argandiza and Dan's best friend was Alan Argandiza, brothers. Dan has also said that they had a lot of fun as kids, making wisecracks from the Three Stooges or repeating and adding goofy things that they heard from neighbors, friends, or the lovable old characters at Sherry Tefillah Synagogue, known as the Shul. In fact, Michael invented a game called Shalopoly, and about those folks, and we would play it from time to time, kind of making fun of the folks that were there. Michael later went into a writing career, and when he did that, he told Dan that he was really just applying the sort of stuff that they did as kids. But these observations that they made at Shul were because they were so often there after the loss of their parents, mourning the loss of their parents, who each died of separate illnesses while Michael was just in his mid-teens. Losing our parents is so sad, but to have had that happen when one is so young is simply a tragedy, a sadness beyond the experience of most of us. With his brothers away at school, Michael adapted to being alone. He did have free reign, and after school was pretty fun. There were some parties at his home along the way. One time, I won't tell you the state of mind we were in, but Michael said it's fun to watch Lawrence Welk in that state. So he then did an impression. Hello, friends. Before Myron Florin plays the accordion, a word from our sponsors as Bobby and Sissy and Guy and Ralna do the Triscuit reel around a box of giant Triscuits. Mike made that up. Pretty clever. Michael was indeed clever and ever prescient. He had a keen interest in music. He liked Elvis Costello and told us about him before anyone knew how great he would become. He would play his music over the intercom when we were DJs at WDHS, which is during high school, radio in the mornings. Michael was a big fan of the band Sweet as well, and he couldn't understand why Tommy James and the Shondells are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We were quiz kids together at Deering. High School Quiz was a weekly TV show that was on Channel 8 when high school students would show their knowledge and talent to win prizes for their schools. Well, I was a sub. I was really part of the crowd, but Michael was on air as a contestant, and rightfully so. Michael had a great sense of humor. He helped Michael Argandizer and me to write a Laurel and Hardy play in Mr. Gordon's 8th grade history class. And he did that really because that's what I wanted to do. He wanted to do the Marx Brothers, whose humor is actually much more clever and humorous. And I wish I had listened to him. We had fun with that project. His mind was already attuned to advertising in high school. He taught us about subliminal advertising and what sells. Okay? Sex is everywhere in advertising, even in the ice cubes in a glass in a magazine. And he spotted it, he showed it to us, and he took, a lot of delight in that. Michael had a special girlfriend of 7 years, Paula Gottlob, and though they were not together, she remains in Seattle, where Michael lived, along with being in LA when he worked for the Dodgers, Seattle, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg. She has fond memories of him, and she has provided comfort over the past several days to those of us, his family and close friends. And if you go to her Facebook page, you'll see wonderful photos of her and Michael in happier times. Michael Argandiza will have some words from her shortly, and he has some pictures of hers as well, and other photos. Michael didn't drive, but he was a great walker. He walked everywhere. He was in good shape. He started taking photos of folks on the scenes of the streets of Harrisburg, and he could have published a book, but he kept it to Facebook. Michael loved animals and always had a dog or a cat, as Rabbi Walensky alluded to, except not again after his beloved dog Mabel and cat Roxy passed on, and he didn't really seem the same after those losses. Michael was also a Facebook rock star. His comments were frequently hysterical and on the mark. He started a baseball page and a political page, followed by many. The baseball one is called The Shortstop, if you can find it, and if there's another administrator that can let you on, it'd be fun to take a look at that. Michael had a knack for finding really funny things, like pictures of Gene Stapleton dressed in immodest clothing next to Alice Cooper at a party, or Curly Howard with a prominent middle finger, Donald Trump with Liberace, Boy George with Mr. T. The list really goes on and on. And he found this really campy version of Paul McCartney's Let 'Em In that was sung by Burt Parks. You've got to YouTube that. It's hysterical. And sometimes as a result of his commentary, Michael would end up in Facebook jail. So he had aliases like Michael Rhodes and a bunch of others too. Michael didn't always have a filter. Rabbi Walensky talked about, he didn't have direction from a very early age. He came up to visit during one of our high school reunions, and our family and he all went out to a Sea Dogs game, and he regaled my young sons with stories of some of our more choice moments of fun in high school. Michael fell on harder times in recent years, and he was quite public about that. A group of high school friends banded together and helped out. COVID in the beginning wiped out a lot of employment opportunities for him and many others. But with the help of folks like Mike Diener and his wife in Harrisburg, who took Michael in and helped him to get medical attention more recently, Michael got some help and he found some work. That was his lot in life at the time of his illness, from which he did not recover. But he was always cheerful, always funny and clever, and he will be missed by so many people.
Thank you, Steve. So now we've heard a lot about Michael and Michael Argandiza. And now let's hear a few words from Michael Argandiza, a very good friend of Michael Modes.
So I'll first read some remarks that I've prepared, and then Paula Gottlob has asked me to read some remarks that she wrote. So for those of you attending here today or viewing the stream online who have yet to meet me, my name is Michael Argandiza, and I was a lifelong friend of Michael's. First, I would like to say thank you to Michael's brothers, Dan and Avi, for allowing me the opportunity to say a few words of remembrance. I first met Michael in 1965 when we both began attending Longfellow Elementary School here in Portland. We weren't in the same kindergarten class, but on the first day of school, we were in adjoining classrooms and several groups had gathered collectively in the hallway awaiting recess. Michael was being quizzed by a trio of girls who were clearly not yet familiar with the differences between their own Christian upbringings and Michael's Jewish faith. I began to eavesdrop and realized just how amused Michael was with himself as he tested and then severely pushed the limits of his audience. They were horrified. I was fascinated. I went right up to him and introduced myself, and from then on, we were inseparable. I spent as much time at the Modes' house as I did at my own, and vice versa. When I met Harold and Lillian Modes, Michael's parents, and brothers Avi and Dan, I realized where he had forged his tremendous wit and intellect. But more importantly about Michael was that he was genuinely good, kind, and caring. He cared about and stood up for marginalized people. And his humor, although it could have an edge, was never hurtful. On Saturday mornings, I would attend Hebrew school with Michael so that we could continue to spend time together. Later on as teenagers, we devised an alter ego, Mike Kaminsky, Michael's cousin from Philly, so that I would be allowed access to the Jewish Community Center. I am hoping that the statute of limitations has expired on that particular deception. I remember sleepovers in the camper that Harold Modes acquired through a bankruptcy client that he had represented. Boxes of chloroform gum or chlorophyll gum, I don't even remember. Just weird things that he had saved. And Lillian always at the kitchen table reading. And my family and his family, we were just so interconnected. Steve, his cousin, was my cousin. Uncle Sidney was my uncle. It was, we were just all one unit. And I also remember trips to Cambridge to see the Winter family, explore the world of fake IDs and beer gardens. And here is where I realized something, that many of the stories that Michael and I lived through together are best shared in a different forum. I hope we have the chance to do that, but I will leave you with a few quick Modesian quotes, as I think they are things that he would like you to consider. A mime is a clown who went to art school. Ukuleles are the bagpipes of subtle sadists. and eggnog is the best. Agree or get new taste buds? Okay, so now I'd like to read Paula Gottloeb's words. She says, I don't even know where to begin. First, I'd like to thank Mike for sharing this tribute, and I send deep condolences to all who knew and loved Michael. I first met him in 1988 at an agency in San Diego. He was the advertising copywriter, and I was the new public relations copywriter in the office next door. We became fast friends, and somewhere along the way, romance blossomed. He moved back to LA in 1990, and I joined not long after. Following in the footsteps of Lee Marvin, without the toxic palimony, we were common law for 7 years. Most relationships would end there, but we cared too much to close the book. I moved to Seattle. He stayed in LA and went on to Florida. Then the call of the Pacific Northwest and me, I always said the job there was a coincidence, beckoned, and he moved to Seattle. We got 5 more good years to hang out together. It's pretty special that even after he moved away, we stayed good friends, and all these years since. We jokingly had a pact that if we were still single when we were 80, we'd get back together in a nursing home. So what can you say about Michael? Whip smart and witty beyond measure. A hardcore cynic hiding in an idealistic romantic. For life, for people, for animals. Some people know a lot about a little, and others a little about a lot. Me. But his curiosity and quest for understanding and knowledge led him to know a lot about a lot. From baseball and politics to movies, music, and religion. He put his love for animals above all else. One time, he got so lonely when I was away on a business trip that he adopted pretty boy Floyd, even though we already had Casey at the bat and Otis the drunk Nixon. When we separated, he let me take Casey so Otis wouldn't be lonely, and then he got Stella so Floyd wouldn't be lonely. Shout out to his other beloveds too, Cyrus, Luna, Mabel, and Roxy. He had heart and compassion like no other. I think it hurt him to be in the world sometimes, but he never gave up wanting to believe the good in people. It's hard to imagine a world without his astute and witty observations, pointing out life's truths and absurdities. I pray you're at peace and reunited with all the souls you've loved before. You will be missed and dearly loved, Mickey Moto, aka Schmoopy. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. In a moment, we will conclude with a final prayer. Before that, I'm going to ask Dan to come up. But let me just give you a minute of housekeeping rules. Following the service today, there will be an immediate interment at Mount Sinai Cemetery. It's on 183 Hicks Street if you want to put it into your GPS. Immediately after that, we are all invited back to the Chabad House, Rabbi Wolanski's residence and center, and that is at 11 Pomeroy Street, where we have a reception and a chance to share some memories and talk a little more about what Michael meant to everybody. And then if we have enough people to do it, we will have a service at approximately 5:30. So before we continue, I'd like to ask Dan to come forward.
I'm here to say thanks, deep gratitude to those of you who have come out to honor Michael's memory and hear more about him. Some things that I didn't know, but didn't surprise me, knowing him as I did. I'd like to thank Rabbi Walensky and Rabbi Berenson. Special thanks to Steve Schwartz and Michael Argandiza. Steve, after I got the stunning news, I talked to some officials, and then I did something which was an unusually intelligent decision for me. I immediately called my cousin Steve because I knew he was dear friend of Mike's and dear friend of our family, and valued him so highly. And I told him what happened after the understandable reaction. He helped me deal with the service, with the funeral, with all that goes with it, and got me in touch with Rabbi Berenson. And I don't think this would have come off without you, Steve. So I'm deeply grateful for your help and your concern. I know you've been busy, and believe me, it could not have happened, at least not as well as it did without you. And thanks, Mike Argandiza. Thanks for those memories. I remember the times too. I remember I was over your house with your parents and your brother, with your dad. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. When my dad asked us if he'd been a good dad, he used your father as the gold standard. Maybe I'm not as good as Mr. Argandiza, but I'm a good dad. Okay. And Mr. Argandiza, he was another great person who left us much too soon. But your mom was and is a great person and an amazing one. That's an overworked word, but it applies to her. And I hope she and the rest of you are around for many years. And thank you, Paula, for your remarks. Again, some of it was new, none of it was surprising. It showed Mike at his best. And all of you have pointed out Mike's intellect, his sense of humor, his basic decency and honesty and goodness. You're all completely right. Sometimes we used to kid him. Sometimes he felt, well, my older brothers are known as so smart. I'm not so, I'm not. I remember when he won the Portland, Maine City Spelling Bee one year. And my Uncle Sidney visited the house and we talked about it, and he said, the dumb one. He won, the dumb one. My brother knew it was a joke. Had a little bit of a point, but it was a joke. And once, as he once said, he loved learning but hated school. And his formal education was not particularly extensive, but his personal education, his intellectual curiosity, his love of learning, his love of reading were extraordinary. He read Dante's Divine Comedy on his own when he was 13. I don't know exactly. I haven't read it yet. Read other stuff, some of which would have chloroformed him totally. And a sense of humor. Yeah, you've given some idea of, the speakers have given some idea of where he got it from. It's part of our Jewish heritage. I mean, he was not that observant. Maybe he was a little deficient on Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the ancient patriarchs, but he was devoted to the modern Jewish patriarchs, Groucho, Chico, and Harpo, and Larry Moe and Curly. And that was part of the Jewish heritage of, when you're born and grow up in the 50s and 60s, and everything we talked about, Alan Sherman and baseball and Sandy Koufax, and that was all part of our heritage. And he did have a tremendous sense of humor. We amused each other endlessly by impersonating people we met at the synagogue. with lines that would mean nothing to anybody else in this room, but cracked us up because we knew that and we could say it over and over again. And the humor wasn't just fun. It really helped keep us together. It really helped keep our family together. You know, we fought over stuff. We alienated each other, but we were closer and happier because we had this silly sense of humor, this spontaneity, this love of laughter. And that's a tremendous part of who Michael was. So you've all set that up very well. And again, I thank everybody who showed up, everybody who's watching on Zoom, everybody who helped make this service possible. And, you know, part of me still doesn't believe this is happening, but it is. And you've all helped me deal with it better. And I am deeply grateful to all of you. Thank you.
I'd like to ask you to please rise if you can as we chant and then recite this final reverential prayer. Ele mole rachamim, shochein b'mrumim, ametzeh menucho nechono, tachas kanfei ashchino, v'malos kadoshim utahorim, kizohar harakia mazirim, es nishmas Moshe Ben Tzvi Hirsch, Sholach Leolamo, Be'gan Eden, Tehei Menuchoto, Ono Balarachamim, Hastirehu, Beseser, Kedofecha Leolamim, Utror, Bitzor Chaim, Es Nishmato, Adonai, Unachalato, V'yanoch b'shalom al mishkovo v'nomar Amen.
O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant proper repose of the sheltering wings of your presence in the lofty levels of the holy and pure, who shine as the brightnesses of the firmament upon the soul of Michael, Moshe Ben Tzvi Hirsch, who has gone to his world, for his memory we pray. May his repose be in paradise. May the Master of compassion bring him under the cover of God's wings and bind his soul in the bond of life. May the Lord be his heritage, and may he repose in a resting place in peace. And let us all respond, Amen.
Well, ask you to remain in your seats until we bring the body away from chapel. Oh, I got it.
Feel free to shout out.
Thank you so much for sharing this. Appreciate it.
It's easiest to catch it off. He's 6.5 now. Yeah. I actually, it's never a while. Oh, there. Oh, yeah. What was the? Yeah, okay, yeah, that would come on. Yeah.
Yeah.